Right, it's a ray of hope for the LGBT community. The Supreme Court has reopened the debate on decriminalising homosexuality. It has referred the curative petition challenging Section 377 to a 5-judge bench. The LGBT community has been fighting tooth and nail to scrap that section which criminalises gay sex. Remember, the Supreme Court had turned down the Delhi High Court's decision to decriminalise homosexuality in 2013, which had led to a huge outcry from gay rights activists, the LGBT community, as well as several other people in the country and abroad. And to discuss all of that and more, I'm now joined by Pallav Patankar, who I told you is Director of Programs at Humsafar Trust, and Vivek, Divan, lawyer and prominent gay rights activist. I welcome you both to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Pallav, I'll start with you. I know you've been patiently waiting for us to have this conversation. Now, the Humsafar Trust has been at the forefront of the fight for the rights of the LGBT community. At the outset, let me ask you, how is today's move being viewed by the community at large?
I think after the Supreme Court verdict in 2013, it just seemed like what is the way forward, and today is that ray of hope and at least an opportunity of that dialogue reopening, because a large part of the community felt totally dismissed in the manner that the Supreme Court verdict of 2013 came in. So I think we can end the day saying that there is that ray of hope which we are looking for, and further dialogue happens.
Right. We are also joined by Vivek Divan. Coming to you now, Vivek, you're a prominent activist for gay rights and you're a lawyer yourself. Now, in a break from tradition, what we saw today, not only has the Supreme Court granted an open court hearing, and this for the first time in 20 years, in fact, it has constituted a 5-judge bench to hear a curative plea. How do you read into these overtures by the Apex Court?
No, I think it's a very positive move. I think it wasn't necessarily expected. This was pretty much as far as we were thinking, the last straw in terms of strategy and options that we had. And I mean, the sense is very clearly that if the court believes that this needs to go before 5 judges to be decided, this is obviously a matter of grave importance. And I think the lawyers in the court kind of communicated that to the judges that millions of people are affected by that decision of 2013, and that generations will be affected if this remedy is not actually available for people, and that if this is closure for the LGBT community. I mean, a whole generation now and a generation in the future, because the options of going to court then get extremely, almost nullified, and the only options then remain are in Parliament, and Parliament is obviously a space which is a little difficult for to actually get anything going in, as Shashi Tharoor has just actually witnessed.
Right. In fact, we haven't even seen the debate come up in Parliament this entire time, so that pretty much seems to be out of the question right now. But staying with you, Vivek, now in 2013, while upholding Section 377, the Supreme Court had passed the buck to Parliament. In fact, just what you were talking about there. Now, given that in most countries we have seen the respective judiciaries intervening to decriminalise homosexuality, and the real question relates to the constitutional rights of the LGBT community. Is it high time that even the Indian judiciary does more to uphold gay rights?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the arguments have been around equality and the whole slew of rights that exist for every one of us as Indians. And they exist in the fundamental rights chapter of the Constitution, and they include everything from equality, like I said, to life, liberty, freedom of expression, speech, etc. I think the Delhi High Court was very, very in tune with that and very sensitive to what we were articulating. I think the Supreme Court, certainly 2 years ago, we felt deeply, deeply upset by their, they're really scanning over, frankly, the way in which communities and people and individuals are affected, without really going into taking on merits the impact of this law and what it does to human dignity and to a person's worth. And I think that this that happened today is probably an indication that the court realizes, hopefully, that this is a matter of grave seriousness which needs to be considered with all its strength.
Right. Pallav, I'm coming to you now. What we have seen today, at best, is a glimmer of hope. But the issue is a social one as well, and not just a legal one. Now, we've seen in countries like Ireland that have legalized same-sex marriage, there is more social acceptance in those countries towards what is actually considered a taboo in India. Which finds itself in companies, in the company of countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, where homosexuality is actually a crime. Changing the law will not change the mindset. How do you think civil society can be made more accepting?
So I totally agree with you. I mean, as an organization which implements programs on the ground, and we are a grassroots level community-based organization, Section 377 is just the starting roadblock for us, because as a criminal, the criminalization comes a huge way in promoting the stigma discrimination on the ground. When we are talking about ending the stigma discrimination, when you're talking about equality, you would first need to remove the decriminalization so as to ensure access to health, access to education, access to livelihood. All those things get affected, which further impacts your socioeconomic status, and the LGBT community does get affected by these discriminations. We have not even got down there to address that. That will only happen, and the social change which you're talking about will happen once we get into those evolved spaces and those arguments, which we are not in right now. We are at a very basic stage of talking about decriminalization, and that too has gone on, for so many years, and it yet continues. So that roadmap is clear. We know where we need to go, but we are just not getting off that roadblock.
Right. Also, what would your expectations be from the government going forward? Like right now, it is in the judiciary's hands, so to say, and we have seen almost unprecedented move by the Supreme Court today. How would you like to take this as far as the government is concerned? Like, are there any measures that you've been taking so far?
To be very honest, I would like a discussion in the parliament, and I would like the parliament to be open to such a discussion. It was indeed sad that when Dr. Shashi Tharoor put that bill in parliament up for discussion, people did not even wish to discuss it. I mean, these are elected representatives of our democracy who refuse to speak about constitutional rights for a part of its population. And I think that is indeed sad. I mean, and I feel unless that happens, governments, agencies, bureaucrats will not be able to take full advantage of so many schemes and social schemes which are meant for the transgender community, even for socioeconomic backward communities, which are there. But by virtue of the stigma discrimination and issues, there are great problems in kind of making them available for the LGBT communities. And I think that's where I feel the government needs to play its role, because on one hand, within the health space, we see that the government is involved with the LGBT community, but on many other fronts, in terms of social entitlement, it is not. And we need to see that uniform across platforms, which we are not seeing at this stage.
Right, Vivek, I'll come to you now in conclusion. If going forward, and this is being optimistic right now, going forward, if indeed the section does get removed and you do have homosexuality being decriminalized, that would just be like a step forward, but it is just a starting block. I mean, what else would you like to see going forward? We have countries now that are legalizing same-sex marriage also. How far do you think we are from that as of right now?
I don't know how far we are from that, but I'll tell you in the 4 years between 2009 and 13 that we were decriminalized, and I think Pallav can attest to that, as can many others who work within communities directly, that it opened up a space for conversation with all kinds of people, including policymakers, including your municipal corporators, including the police, including healthcare, the healthcare sector, etc., because there was a sense that, okay, now that we're not criminalized, we can have this very open conversation about our needs, etc. And I think once this happens again, and hopefully it will with the Supreme Court's final decision, that space will open up. And once that space opens up, a whole bunch of things, and Pallav mentioned some of them, including employment rights, health rights, all those kinds of things can actually mushroom and really become meaningful in queer people's lives. I'll give you an example of two dear friends of mine. They've been together for 35 years in Mumbai. They're two men. And when one of them is ill and the other has to take them to hospital, the doctors or whoever's admitting them in asks who you are. And it's almost impossible for that other person to actually explain their relationship because it would be completely looked at as illegitimate. And I think there are moments like these in our lives which I think straight people take completely for granted, which actually queer and gay people do not, because they are constant hurdles. And once criminalization is removed, you can actually, claim partnerships. I'm not sure about marriage. Marriage is a step